Alright. Hey there, YouTube. Well, I finally relented after a few people have asked. And so I'm going to start doing these characters, and I'm going to do my own character and why I like them video. Because people keep asking me, oh, you should join into this. I'm sure you got quite a few characters that you love. I think I'm going to talk about probably the very first ever comic book characters that I ever read in my life. And that is the X-Men. Now, what do the X-Men mean to me? I mean, this can go along with my... This is why I like comic book stuff, excuse me. I did that video. Hopefully you guys will be posting responses to that, because I really want to kind of, just like Zipblock is doing with these characters and why I like them videos, the what comic books mean to you kind of deal gets going. But I'm wasting time here. The X-Men were the first characters that I ever read in my life, and that simply comes out of the fact that when I was very young, like I would say 5 or 6, when I was in elementary school, I was beat up. I was called retard. As someone growing up with Asperger's syndrome, I had all these bad things happen to me. Like I said, I was called retard. I was made fun of. I had very few friends, and the friends that I did make, they ended up moving away, or they just kind of abandoned me because they thought that, because after a while they just got tired of being around me. Because, little kids are, because kids are very cruel nowadays. And I also had adults that would restrain me whenever I would just get out of control, quote unquote. And I mean, I was a very rebellious kid because, I always was talked down to. Everybody always thought that I was incompetent, that I was stupid. And as a kid, I was rebelling against that because it's like, why am I the one who's always being talked to? Why aren't the other kids, being punished? I felt that I was being punished simply because I was different, because I stood out in the crowd. And as a kid, you hate that. You want to get along. You want everyone to love you. You want to be normal. You want to be normal. And as a kid, that was very traumatic to me, and I went through it even through junior high, and it was right in high school when I had met, Seth, my best friend, who's been my best friend for 3 or 4 years now, and it was through Xbox Live that I had met the monster and also, with the job that I have and everything else, I'm starting to develop a group of people that accept me for who I am. And part of me is very grateful for that, but part of me is also kind of thinking that that's a delusion, that it's not going to last, that it's just going to be like elementary school all over again. And wanting to be normal, my dad and my mother, even though they were constantly fighting and bitching at each other before they had divorced, they were kind of like, our son, kind of needs us. And so what my dad came up with is that because I was a very imaginative kid, because, I was watching Spider-Man, because I had watched a few, cartoons like Spider-Man, and, saw, Indiana Jones and the Chris Reeve Superman films, that they started buying me comic books. And one of the first ones was the X-Men, because, because my dad's rationality was that if I started reading X-Men comics, that I would feel better about myself, and it actually worked, because look at the X-Men. I mean, they're characters who were they were mutants, they were outcasts. There were people that were not like me when I was at that very young age. They weren't normal. But yet, despite all these abnormalities, all these abilities that they had, they functioned as a team. They put aside all their petty differences, all their prejudices, and they worked together, and that they accepted and supported each other. Now, if you're a little kid, that's awe-inspiring. And that's why I always will love the X-Men, and that's why and of course when comic books became obscured, you know, that was during a time when I kind of wanted to commit suicide, because it's like, you know, the heroes that I looked to, they were becoming too obscured. They weren't, you know, they weren't giving me what I wanted. You know, they didn't give me that sense of comfort. They just kind of went and fucked off and did their own thing. And so when the first X-Men film came out, that rekindled not only my love for comic books, but it showed me that it in a sense gave me a sense of hope. Because the X-Men film basically rekindled that message that I remember when I was 5 or 6 and I first read X-Men. That symbol of hope, that being different is not necessarily a bad thing, but that you gotta work at it. You gotta fight for what you believe in. You gotta fight to prove to people that you know, yeah, I'm different, but, you know, inside, you know, emotionally and mentally and physically, and, you know, within, you know, the mind and the heart, that I am just like you. And that is one thing that I will always enjoy about X-Men. Of course, the X-Men nowadays aren't, they're doing that, you know, thing where they're kind of going off and not making sense. But hopefully they'll bring it back to that camaraderie. You know, they do it every once in a while. And I think that's one thing that Chris Claremont did very well, is that he didn't just write the X-Men comics and made them action-packed, but he told a story. He told each individual character's story and actually made you attached to them. Like Colossus, I always love as one of my favorite X-Men, simply because he was just a small farm boy in Russia who didn't care about the Cold War. He was just a genuinely nice guy. He was, you know, a gentle giant, and I attached to that. Nightcrawler, despite Nightcrawler, you know, having this demon impish appearance, he was this very religious, very philosophical, and very, you know, warm and kind-hearted spirit. And even Wolverine, as gruff and tough as Logan is, you know, Logan had a heart. And he always kind of, you know, looked out for some of the younger X-Men, including Rogue. And that's what it's all about. To me, that's what it's about, and that's why I love the X-Men. It's simply because the X-Men, you know, at a very crucial time in my life when I was still very young, they influenced me to be a good person, despite the fact that I was completely different and felt alienated from everyone else. You know, a lot of people say that comic books, you know, warp kids' minds. That may be partially true, but comic books are also a salvation for kids. And like I've said dozens of times, and I'll say it again, superheroes are needed more than ever in this generation. And, you know, superheroes will always be needed. They were needed in the past, they're needed now in the present, and they'll most definitely be needed in the future. And, you know, that's, to quote the monster, that's all I gotta say.